Terminator 2 Judgment Day was released in 1991, and it was directed by James Cameron, just like the last film, and it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, and Edward Furlong. Just like the last film, this film is about a protector and a Terminator both being sent from the future back in time. But instead, this time it's going into 1995 to kill John Connor as a 10-year-old kid. So it's a race to see who can get to John Connor first, the protector or the Terminator. I don't even think I even have to review this movie. Like, you already know how awesome this movie is. But we're gonna gush about it anyway. That's right, I said we. Because I feel like that in order to truly express how awesome this movie is, I'm getting another Terminator 2 fan, Movie Mania TV, and together we're going to tackle this movie, and we're both going to gush about how much we love this movie, because this movie is awesome.
Hello guys, and what is up? And first I'd like to start this review with a huge thank you to Corey's Reviews for letting me be a part of this video. It'll be a lot of fun.
But one thing I'm going to say is that we have a lot to say about this movie, so if you haven't seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day yet, I highly recommend you go and check it out first, because this video is going to be filled with spoilers. You have been warned. Having that said, Terminator 2 Judgment Day! Woo! Man, I love this movie.
And so Terminator 2 is about, is a sequel, a follow-up to Terminator 1. And in this movie, Skynet sends a T-1000, an enhanced Terminator, back in time to kill John Connor, but the Resistance learns about this just in time, and they send the T-800 back in time to try and protect John Connor.
I have got to say though, the opening to this movie is genius. I love the whole post-apocalyptic setting. The T-800s look much better than they did in the first movie. It's just really great action movie stuff, and I liked how we only got a little bit of it and it wasn't overused. I also love how Sarah Connor summarizes what happened in the first movie at the very beginning of the film. Because James Cameron says something that I agree with, and it's the idea that a good sequel shouldn't require you to have seen the first movie. James Cameron knew this, and so he just had Linda Hamilton summarize the first movie. Which is why I have to say that if you haven't seen any of these movies, I recommend skipping the first movie and going and watching Terminator 2 straight away. Then go back and watch the first movie, because I consider this movie the better experience. The score is awesome! I love the overall melody that plays. I love that music, however, I also love their very iconic da-dun-dun-da-dun, da-dun-dun-da-dun. Every time I listen to that, it just gets me pumped up, and it's just so simple. It's just 5 notes, but it's really adrenaline pumped, like it gets you really excited. I already used the word love a lot in this movie, but it's true. There's a lot of moments I love in this movie. This movie has so many awesome moments. I love the opening scene with the bar. That scene is fantastic. I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. You forgot to say please. Everything from that quote to the blah to the bone joke at the end of the scene, that scene is just awesome. It's priceless, and it makes me laugh every single time. This scene really does set a great tone of the rest of the film. It's like the movie's actively telling you with this scene, hey, we're gonna be incredibly violent, okay? But we don't care because you're gonna be incredibly entertained while we do it.
This movie's a lot of fun, and it's also great. It's really great. It's honestly one of my favorite action movies of all time, and one of my favorite movies.
This movie is just incredibly fun, despite the fact that there's a lot of violence, a lot of dying, and a lot of explosions in this movie. It's still incredibly entertaining due to the choreography of the action scenes and the stunt work and the one-liners. We'll get back to those action scenes in a bit, don't you worry. One thing I really have to establish though is how clever the first half an hour is of this movie. Now everyone gushes about how shocking and mind-blowing the Empire Strikes Back twist was. However, I feel like that this movie has my favorite twist of all time. And it's annoying because there's a lot of people who summarize this movie, and they have this twist in the summary, which annoys me. It's basically nearly common knowledge these days that Arnold Schwarzenegger in this movie is to protect the Terminator. Despite the fact he was a Terminator in the first movie, he's been reprogrammed, and now in this movie, he's the protector, and the villain is a T-1000 liquid metal Terminator. However, I've got to say that I did not know about the T-1000 going in, and I did not know much about the first movie. This is my first Terminator movie. So that's one thing you guys need to know. Going into Terminator 2, I knew nothing about it. And I knew nothing about the previous movie. I was going into it completely blind, and I am so glad that happened. The way the film was set up, considering Arnold was the Terminator in the first movie, and even standalone with the whole red vision and how aggressive he is and everything to his accent, the way he moves, every way he acts in this movie throughout the first half an hour makes you believe that he is the Terminator. And then we've got the Liquid Metal Terminator, who is not that aggressive. He does kind of kill a policeman, but the way he does it, you may think he just punched him or something. So he's a lot more gentle, at least at first he seems more gentle. And when he's talking, communicating to other people, he knows how to communicate to them. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. The T-1000's attitude, and then the T-800's extremely aggressive behavior. When the T-800 first sees John Connor, he goes target acquired, and turns around, goes after him, and he buys a gun and everything. Everything the way the first half an hour sets up makes you believe that Arnold is the Terminator. So throughout the first half an hour, I thought that the Liquid Metal Terminator was actually the Protector. And I basically eventually made up my mind going, alright, it's a fact. Arnold is the Terminator. This guy, the policeman, he's the Protector. And then eventually they met in the shopping mall and they're closing in on John Connor. And then suddenly it's just those magic two words when Arnold goes, "Get down!" John ducks, and as the gun explodes, boom! Mind blown. It is just one angle of the film that you really will miss out on if you know about that going into the movie on your first viewing. Admittedly, it did confuse me and throw me off at first, but once I managed to pick up the pieces and realize what happened, my mind was incredibly blown, and that is why it's my favorite twist of all time. I just wish that people didn't spoil it for everyone else nowadays, because I feel sorry for those who knew about that going in. This is something that really added to the movie. And now, pretty much everything is spoiling it. Now, I know admittedly the movie is extremely old, so maybe I should forgive it, but at the same time, I still kind of feel sorry for those who knew about it going into the movie on their first go, because it really adds to the experience. It really does.
The characters are just absolutely perfect. You feel for each of them, each and every one of them. You just have so much emotion and feeling towards, and you connect to them perfectly. I feel that every action hero or should be vulnerable. In Die Hard, for example, John McClane and his bloody feet, that was a great example of vulnerability in an action hero, and we don't really see a lot of that anymore, which is depressing because a good action hero has to be vulnerable. He can't just be this crazy, overpowered, unstoppable force. He has to be, or he or she has to be vulnerable. And arguably the action hero in this is Linda Hamilton's character, Sarah Connor, and she captures that perfectly, especially in one scene where she's at the mental hospital and the T-800 comes right into the door and she freaks out. She just has that moment where she says, "Oh jeez, he'll kill me, he'll kill us all." And that's perfect, and that is a perfect scene. There's so many things, you're gonna hear that word a lot in this review, perfect. Because there's so many things that are perfect in this movie. It's crazy how a movie that seems that could have easily gone into the dumb, stupid, fun category of film, went into the kind of film that makes you think, but it's also just so much energy and so much fun to watch. I love the relationship in this movie between John Connor and the T-800, the Terminator. It feels so perfect. Each of them just interlock the moment they meet. And and a lot of comedy plays off the duo, a lot of drama, and it's really just really refreshing to feel that, because we don't get a lot of great duos in action, or really in a lot of other movies nowadays. I mean, there's Nick Wilde and Judy Hopps in Zootopia. That's really the only recent one that I can think of that are great.
The cast is spot on for this movie. Now, a lot of people say that what makes a good movie usually can be 90 to 80% of the actor's performance, and I think that this movie proves, because the actors alone make this movie incredibly fun to watch. I am of course talking about the main trio, Linda Hamilton, Edward Furlong, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Linda Hamilton is perfect for Sarah Connor. She was pretty good, and I really liked her in the Terminator, but in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, she knocked it out of the park. She was magnificent in this movie. She is a strong, compelling female character who basically lost her mind. Considering she was exposed to the machines taking over the world in the first movie, She's been locked up in a mental institution. She's been doing a lot of training since the first movie, and she is an incredibly strong female character. She is a master at using her weapons. Like, she is incredibly strong. However, mentally, she's pretty weak. Not only did they get the balance of her physicality and emotional state right of making her a strong female character, but I also love her character arc, because she goes through a huge character arc in this movie, which is completely different to the first movie, but it really adds to her character. She becomes so obsessed with destroying Skynet and so afraid of Skynet shutting down the world that she basically becomes insane. She loses her sanity, and she even loses her love for her son. So much to the point that once she has all the information she needs, she basically turns into a Terminator herself. As for she gets out a gun and goes out to kill the creator Cyberdyne without having any second thoughts. And it isn't until that she's finally pointing the gun right at him and is about to fire, and the way that the camera is just really sticking to the close-up of her face, and you can tell that at that moment her brain just snaps, and she suddenly quickly regained her sanity, as for she realized what she was about to do. And then you can see on her face that she was destroyed about it. She realized she was about to kill a man. And then she just breaks down, ashamed of what she was about to do. And all beforehand, even though that she did have a nice side to her, like, you can tell that she still loved her son. However, her emotional state was really unstable just due to being locked up in a mental institution and then having repeated nightmares about Judgment Day every single night. And the film is about her trying to regain her sanity. She's a great female character because she's physically really strong, however mentally she is very vulnerable and needs to overcome her vulnerability, making Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor my favourite female character in any action movie to date. Edward Furlong was also great as John Connor. A lot of people do get very alienated about child actors. However, I don't know anyone who didn't like Edward Furlong's performance in this movie, despite the fact that his voice was actually cracking during filming of the film. So half of the scenes being shot had to be reshot to make sure that his voice sounded more consistent. Edward Furlong was fantastic in this role. Arnold Schwarzenegger is just as great as the Terminator in this movie as he was in the last one. But not only that, but the relationship between John Connor and this Terminator really adds to the comedy of this film. This movie is a lot funnier than the original. This is actually a really funny movie. The moments between John Connor and the Terminator have some really genuinely good laugh out loud moments. Like the scene where John Connor tells Arnold to smile. Smile every once in a while. That's good. Maybe you can practice in front of a mirror or something. There's a lot of great one-liners as well. I need your clothes, your boots, your motorcycle. I'll be back. Or my personal favourite, hasta la vista, baby. Now you know where the ending catchphrase of all my YouTube videos came from. You know how I end all my videos off with hasta la vista, baby? This is where that came from.
So let's talk about the action for a few minutes. Every action movie, of course, has to have great action, and this movie has some of the best action scenes I've ever seen in my life. The finale is absolutely perfect. It's suspenseful, keeps you on the edge of your seat at all times. Every single action scene in this movie just feels so right and so perfect, and it's crazy how amazing these scenes are. Especially one scene towards the end of the movie involving a runaway helicopter, which is perfect, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions. I gotta say, dude, Arnold Schwarzenegger is so freaking badass in this movie. And when they're in the trench and the T-800 is on the motorcycle and the T-1000 is chasing after him and John Connor, and he pulls out that shotgun and starts flipping it and shooting at him, that was amazing. I just jumped out of my seat when that happened because it's just awesome. It's amazing. He's so cool in this movie. And Arnold Schwarzenegger could not have possibly captured the energy and emotionless feel of a robot in this film. And towards the end, he does gain some emotion. And I feel that's great. That's another great part of this movie.
I 100% agree with you. The action in this movie is groundbreaking. One of my favourite action scenes of all time is the scene with the motorbike and the truck in the trench. That scene had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I also do love the fact that Arnold does flip the gun around his fingers every single time he's about to fire. Does it really help him with his fire? I don't really think so, but damn, it just looks so cool! I love the whole sequence where Sarah Connor tries to escape the mental institution. That incredibly awesome scene with Arnold and the minigun. This movie has great, big, practical action set pieces, and it looks great. Most of the effects are very practical. A lot of people say, wow, the CGI on the T-1000 is really revolutionary. But there really isn't that much CGI in this movie. The CGI was done very, very sparingly. There's the whole scene where the T-1000 goes through the metal bars, or when his head splits and he comes back. But when his head is just staying split, or like whenever you're seeing that little substance, and there's a lot of texture to it, it's a practical effect. And so when the CGI is used, it still looks great, even by today's standards. It looks even better than the T-1000 from Terminator Genesis, which just came out last year. And all the other effects are practical. Most of the stunt work you see is fantastic and it's real. A helicopter nearly did only just go over that bridge by like that much. A truck really did drive off a bridge. They actually did blow up a 4-story building. There's just beautiful wide shots of actual gunfire and actual explosions and chaos. Really gorgeous looking stuff. There's no shaky cam to be found at all.
Also, I love the messages in this movie. There are so many great messages in this film, such as humans will eventually destroy themselves, and it's just so powerful. And in a lot of scenes, they really hammer that home without pounding your face in with their message, because a lot of movies pounds your head in with their message, and it's annoying and it gets really preachy, but this movie doesn't do that. It takes a few select scenes and says, hey, let's put a moral, a message, to make the human race better in this movie, and it works, and it's so powerful, and uplifting, and it's great. And to be honest, I honestly think that this is one of the best movie morals of all time, because there's so many great ones, and they're all so enriching and fulfilling, and honestly just feels great.
Another thing that this movie has that I absolutely love is there is no fate but what we make. I also love the extended cut of the film. Now, I own 2 copies of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and they are both the extended cut. Here in Australia, the theatrical cut is on Netflix, and I've got to say that the extended cut has much better storytelling. All of the characters are actually further developed. There's a lot of great scenes, like we get to see that the leader of Cyberdyne is not just a guy who wants to create like this computer thing like he is, but he's actually a really good man. Like, he has a family, he has a wife and children, and he's actually a really good man. There's a lot of great development scenes between Edward Furlong and the Terminator. In fact, some of the best scenes with John Connor and the Terminator were actually cut from the theatrical cut of the film. There is a brilliant scene that really did extend the relationship between Sarah Connor and her son, John Connor, when they're arguing on whether or not they should destroy Arnold's CPU. Not only does that scene expand on their characters, but it also expands on the scene/relationship between John Connor and the Terminator, because it really helps why he starts learning throughout the rest of the film. And it's such a great and important scene that it really makes me wonder, why the hell was this scene cut from the theatrical cut of the film? The extended cut of this movie is 2.5 hours long, which is pretty long for an action movie. However, I don't care.
Honestly, there are flaws, but there are not a lot of them. Every movie has flaws, I feel. But there aren't a lot of them. I feel that the plot sort of stops in its tracks for like a half hour or even 40 minutes. The plot just kind of stops in its tracks, and the movie just forgets about the story. And I don't really like when that happens in movies. I feel that the 30-40 minutes devoted to this subplot is great. I feel it's really awesome. But maybe it wasn't needed. I don't know. I think that's the only flaw in this movie. Otherwise, it's perfect. Like I said, no movie is perfect, but some, like Terminator 2, come really, really, really close.
I don't think the movie is slow or dull or boring or anything towards the second act. I can definitely see where that's coming from, though. I get why people say that the little area in the desert can be a bit dull or bland, but I get so invested into the characters, and I just really love seeing the characters being so well developed, that I don't care. But there is one issue that does bother me about the second act. There's a subplot that is introduced in the second act in the movie that's about trying to destroy Cyberdyne, and eventually the movie just forgets about the T-1000 at one point. And when the T-1000 finally comes back for the third act, when he comes back on screen, almost every time I watch this movie, except for the very last time when I watched it again for the sake of the review, every time he pops back up, I go, oh wow, the T-1000. I completely forgot about him. Now, the extended cut of this movie is already 2.5 hours long, but I do think it could have possibly gone even longer. Just simply maybe add 2 or 3 maybe scenes of the T-1000 trying to make progress in between that subplot, just so that we remember his presence throughout the entire film, because throughout the second act you kind of forget about him. Does this impact the theatrical cut? I don't really know, because I've only seen the theatrical cut once. But apart from that, I have no flaws with this movie. This is one of my favorite, actually it is possibly my favorite movie of all time. There are no dull moments in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I love this movie. I just think that maybe 1 or 2 more scenes of the T-1000 can be added to the extended cut, just so we remember that he's there, because if you just add that one tiny little feature, this movie would be flawless. This is by far the best action film I've ever seen. Heck, I even think that it is possibly my favorite movie of all time. At the moment, I've always said that Inside Out is my favorite movie of all time, but lately, I've honestly been having a really hard time trying to figure out which one takes the top of my absolute favorite movie of all time. And if I had to make a choice right this second, I think I'd have to say T2. Terminator 2 Judgment Day gets pretty much everything right. It's everything an action film should be. Just like the last film, I am proud to own this movie on DVD. I love, and I mean love, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Guys, if you have not seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day, go and do yourself a favor and go and see it now, because it is the best action film ever made, at least in my opinion. Right this second, it's even my favorite movie of all time. Don't miss this one. Please, check out Terminator 2 Judgment Day if you haven't seen it already.
This is just such a great movie. One of my favorites. It has so much heart, so much emotion packed into it, with all the action, all the character drama, all the development, and it honestly feels so great. It's one of my favorite action movies, definitely in the top 10 for one of my favorite movies of all time. Maybe even top 5, I'm not even sure. Gonna have to take a rain check on that. But again, thank you so much, Corey's Reviews, for letting me a part of this video. It was a lot of fun. And I think that's about it for my review. I will give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. Like I said, it's not perfect, but no movie is. It's so close to being perfect. It is so close. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day abso-stinking-lutely gets an A+.
Thank you for joining me on this collaboration. It was a lot of fun to do this review with you, Movie Mania TV. Stay tuned for my review for Terminator 3. I'll see you in that review. But until then, hasta la vista, baby.